YSU English Festival. I am Jeff Buchanan, co-chair of the English Festival Committee, and with me this afternoon is Rita Williams-Garcia. I would like to welcome Rita to the 2020 Youngstown State University English Festival. Rita is our James Houck lecturer this year, and she will be back in 2021 as well, in the flesh, in person, in Youngstown. Rita is a New York Times best-selling author of a dozen novels for young adults and middle grade readers, and she's the recipient of the Coretta Scott King Award, Newbery Honor, and National Book Award finalist designations, and the Scott Odell Prize for Historical Fiction. 2021 as well. You perhaps know her best and love her for her Gaither Sisters trilogy. That trilogy includes festival books One Crazy Summer and Gone Crazy in Alabama. Rita has said that writing stories for young people is her passion and her mission. Amen to that. Welcome, amen. Rita Williams-Garcia.
Amen, welcome, amen.
What we've planned today is a question and answer session with you, Rita, and with our viewers and listeners. I have a number of questions to share, but students and listeners may also reach out during this session with additional questions. So please submit either to Facebook or to YouTube, and we will do our best to keep track of the questions as we go and feed them to Rita so you can get your question answered. I'd like to begin, Rita. I understand you were interested in writing at a pretty early age. Can you tell us about how you got started as a writer and what first interested you about it?
Okay, well, I'm going to give you the short version because the long one gets really involved and too detailed for anybody to really remember or care. So I was just a kid with a huge imagination, thanks to my sister, who always slid picture books in my playpen when I was very little, and I would turn the pages and see the pictures and start to just really bloom with stories in my mind. I'm gonna share a little bit of just a little bit of my PowerPoint, if you bear with me. I hope that doesn't mean I lose your faces. But here we go. Oh, look, I can see you. Yay. Okay. So, yeah, so it was always something, whoops. It was always something that, that I was interested in. And I told a lot of tall tales as a kid, not because I had mischief on my mind, but because I just you could just never ask me a simple question and I would give this simple answer. I had to make it bigger. And I think I still write that way today. This is one of my early efforts. My first novel, it was all about my adventures in elementary school. And I don't know if you can really see this, but I have three names: Rita Highland Williams. Highland was my elementary school. Well, anyway, every night, I was in the 7th grade, so I was like 12. Every night I would come home and I would get my homework out of the way, and then I would write in my diary and write in my writer's journal, and then I would write 500 words every night of my novel. Why 500 words? Because I learned that writers got paid by the word, like 5 cents, 10 cents. And the really good magazines, they paid 15 cents a word, so I wanted to make sure that I could make lots of money. So now if you see in the bottom lower right hand of the manuscript, it has the letters 60 and on the other page 67. Those aren't the pages, those are my word counts. I was not going to cheat myself out of all of those words. I kept a diary. These are my actual diaries. They have gone through the wars with me. And so that kind of really helped me a little bit when I was writing One Crazy Summer. I would send my stories out, and they would get rejected. But eventually, I did have some luck, and I sold a short story to Highlights magazine when I was about like 14. Jeff, should I keep rolling, or do you have
No,
questions for me?
I'm sorry, we just got a question in from Denise, one of our listeners and viewers. Was there a specific person that inspired you to make any of the characters in the Gaither family?
Wow. Oh, very good. Thank you, Denise, for that. Well, I am one of three siblings. I am the baby. They still call me that, and I'm over 60. I am the baby. My brother is the middle, and my sister Roz is the oldest. And I would say that my sister Rosalind, in some ways, reminds me of Delphine, in that she was in charge of us, especially when we were really little. And we are stair steps. We are 1 year apart, but she was like the little mother, and so she had to really take care of us while my mother worked, or while my father was away. He was in the army, so he was away a lot, and so we had to mind our big sister. But me and Russell, we would always cut up and just get on her nerves. So I would have to say my sister Roz, but also other girls in my neighborhood, my friends who were older sisters. I noticed that they never had as much time to play with me, because they had a lot of responsibility. And I think in a lot of households, the big sister really had to pull the weight and really help out the parents a lot. So I wanted to pay homage to that. Thank you, Denise.
That's Rita. The couple books we read, right, has the sisters traveling, right? A journey to California, a journey to Alabama. Was that common for you as a child growing up? Did you go visit grandmother, great aunts, great grandmother every summer? Did you? No, so that part is imagined.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that is imagined. I would hear my friends talking about, oh, we're going down south, to visit grandma, or we're going to Kansas to see our uncle, or everybody was going somewhere. They were going to Puerto Rico. They were going to back home to Jamaica. And where were we going? In our living room to watch the Mets. So so that is, that's the part that's so much fun for a writer, to kind of reimagine what life would be like. But my father, on the other hand, when he was young, he and his mother and brother, they were born in they're from North Carolina, and they migrated, the Great Migration, in the 1940s. And so my father always had to go down south every summer to spend time with his grandmother and his father. Their parents split up. And he would sometimes go by himself, and it was, my grandmother told me it was not unusual to see kids traveling by themselves at that time, because just all adults took on the role of parenting. And so if they saw a child, they made sure that the child got off at their right stop, and that kind of thing. The late Maya Angelou has in her biography, she talks about how she traveled across the country with her younger brother by themselves to get to their grandparents' home. And they were little. They were small children. So that kind of thing did happen quite a bit, I believe.
So tell us a little more about some of your other books.
Okay.
Written
So
a wide variety. So
okay. So so when I went to college, you would have thought that I would have studied writing. I did, but I had a passion for dance. So the first novel that I wrote was titled Blue Tights, and I used quite a bit of my dance knowledge to write that story. And you know, it was kind of a difficult story to write in a certain way, because at that time when I wrote it, people weren't talking about body images, and this was a girl who was very self-conscious about her body, especially being a dancer. And then also, you know, she just really struggled to be treated like a little girl when the world looked at her as a woman. She was just 15 years old. So I liked writing those kinds of stories, stories where the characters were struggling with self. So that was my first novel, and then thereafter I had about these five novels that dealt with a lot more, I think, a teen related subjects, from being a teen mother, to struggling with self perception and failure. I talked a lot about abuse, whether it was sexual abuse or peer on peer violence. And I talked about personal rights in No Laughter here, even though the characters are very young, but the subject matter is very serious. So yeah, I took on quite a bit of I guess kind of issues related stories for teens, but I really like to come through those stories through the characters, so you got a good sense of the characters, and that you weren't being hit over the head with the issues, but that you got to understand a lot more about people that maybe you wouldn't necessarily like if you met them, or have that opportunity to get to know them. So that's something else that I like to do. I like to really talk about characters when I'm talking about teens, characters truly involved with self struggle, and that they do have a long way to go. And I like, you know, making that slow and I hope credible journey to getting there.
Gina asks if there are any specific roadblocks you faced while publishing and or making the books. But I wonder your comment about controversial subjects
Mm.
or more difficult kinds of things to talk about. If any of those kinds of things raised issues for you when you went to try to get these novels out to the public.
Well, excuse me. um, do not worry. I have allergies. Anyway, okay. So with the first book, Blue Tights, that took me about like 6, 7 years before I had a publisher. I wrote it straight out of college, and so this is a story about a girl with a big butt, and so that you know, back then, nobody was talking like the whole bootylicious thing and all of that. That's all relatively new. So nobody understood that book. And because there were so few people of color in publishing, in as editors and so forth, they quite didn't know what to do with it. And how was that a story? A girl with a big butt, shouldn't that be maybe a girl with a large chest or something like that? And why is she always getting herself into trouble? Shouldn't she be fighting racism instead? Is this a good role model? So that was kind of that was a struggle to get that character across. So it really did take a lot of time things to change and for people. Oh, it really took Oprah, I think, for the worldview to change on, what is appropriate story material and how characters, like they don't have to be the same cookie cutter kind of character. Yeah, that took a lot, but it also took a very special editor to see it and say, there is something here. I may not understand it completely, but I love this story and I want to fight for it. And so she gave me a chance. And to this day, I am still with her. I have published all of my novels with my same editor. And so when I remember when I said, I want to write a story about female genital mutilation for a slightly younger reader. Oh my goodness. A little bit of reservation, but she trusted me. So I have an awful lot to be thankful for, that this publisher was brave enough to write a very controversial to publish a very controversial story. Now, the thing that is controversial about that is that it's a practice that's done in other countries, primarily in different regions of Africa, and it has very complex meaning behind it. But basically, a female is ritually cut or mutilated in some way, her genital area, for a host of reasons. And so, yeah, that's a very hard subject to talk about, and very hard subject to publish, very hard subject to sell, especially at that time. I think a lot of ground has been broken. And so a lot of these very different and difficult subjects are like, we're talking about them now. We're acknowledging that we can't just be silent about what happens to children around the world.
Can you tell us a little more about your writing process? We saw those old notebooks in your earlier slide. Do you still write in notebooks?
I certainly do. I do. By the way, I don't just write like serious subject matter. I write fun stuff too. So I do have a couple of picture books. And this is me at work at my desk. I have since upgraded my my alien head looking monitor. I have a really nice flat screen looking one, but I do write at my desk. But I also write on the train. I get lost in the movement of the train. I think it's like babies who go to sleep in the car. I really feel relaxed when the train is bumping along and I'm writing. And yes, that's me writing by hand. I will get back to that. But this is one of the first things that I do when I'm writing a story. I tell myself the story, and I do it by hand. I generally write the first thing in the morning. I try not to look at mail, to put on TV, or have anything from the outer world come to me. I'd much rather have the first thing on my mind, my characters, and what they're thinking and what they're doing. So I tell myself the story in 1 or 2 pages, and then I begin to write by hand in this manner. And I do write in these long columns. I get more on the page that way. Then I start to type it. Now, if you notice, see, a manuscript is in a double space, and it has like, the appropriate margins all the way around. Okay, nothing like this chaos theory going on. I type kind of in a wider column, and then I leave a lot of space. Why? Because I know that as I read, I'm going to insert things. I'm going to ask myself questions. I'm going to remind myself to research something. I'm going to move something here and there. I'm going to change words. I'm going to cross things out. So a lot of that gets done here. So I don't put my manuscript in a finished form because we're in our working phase, and so I always say that writing is fighting. Those are actually my boxing gloves. I'm a huge fan, but when I need to get away from my work because it's hurting me, I go to the gym and I put on my boxing gloves and I hit the body bag or something like that. And then my mind is clearer, much clearer. And so then eventually I get to the after usually maybe 4 drafts of a novel, then I kind of get to that point where, okay, now I'm going to put it in the proper format, because now I'm getting ready to send it out into the world. And so, yeah, this is actually my first page manuscript from which one? From PSB 11. And then oh, nope, I don't fight it. I don't fight yet. I put a cover on top of it, and then I send it to my editor, the same editor I've been working with over the years. She reads it many times, and then she will send me a detailed letter. And that letter is it's called an editorial letter. It is short, and it's or it's usually short, and it's about 3 or 4 pages. And she tells me all the things that she loves in the beginning, and then she tells me the things that need a little explaining to do, Lucy. I have to clarify something. I have to reword something. Sometimes I'm not even aware of my word repetition, and she'll point those out. And then sometimes she might say, Rita, do you think you need this chapter? Then I put on my boxing gloves and I go back to the gym and I start dealing with my, frustration. I love that chapter. I need that chapter. Don't take my chapter away from me. And then I come back home. I'm rested. I open up my manuscript. I start to read it and I go, I don't need that. And I take it out. I generally take it out. Or I explain why I need that. Not just because I want it. And then eventually what happens is she starts editing, and then I answer more questions. It goes to copy editing. And while that's happening, I start to get pictures of the characters for the cover by the illustrator, and my fabulous illustrator is Frank Morrison. And then eventually there's a jacket. Now the jacket does not come with these wonderful medals on it, but boy was I ever grateful when I did.
During a specific day, as you're working, because you showed us both pages that you're typing or you're composing, but then that when you go back and read and make comments, and you're doing some editing, you're doing some revising.
Yeah.
What's the balance there? Do you say, I'm going to work all morning on the writing, I'll do the editing in the afternoon? Do you say today's an editing day, today's a writing day? How does that? Just I wonder, a little glimpse and a little more detail of what a typical day is like.
Okay, so a typical day for me, when I am in the throes of a novel, that means, I have told myself this story so many times that I know it. So in the morning, the first thing I do is write. I do write by hand. I am generating pages. I'm writing dialogue that is just popping into my head. I'm so that's about 4 hours. That's from the time that I wake up um, to the time that it's time for me to have my breakfast. So that's when everything comes pouring out. But I know that that stuff that I just did is going to need some rethinking. Usually I give it some time before I try to shape it into something, because I really have to have maybe the full chapter there before I even think about typing. But once I get to that point of I think it's time to type something, um, I then I need just a little bit of distance from it so that I'm not reading what I want to read. I'm reading what I've written. And then I can see it and go, okay, this really doesn't belong here, or this is too much inside her head. And I think we need some action. We need things to happen. So I have to have I have my writer's head, my creative writer's head in the morning. And then I have a little bit more of an objective head in the afternoon. And that's when oftentimes, that's when I'm on the train, kind of looking at it and going, oh, no, so.
You have a trick for when you get stuck? One of our readers asked about what happens when you hit a roadblock, or every writer who has a little bit of trouble. What do you do?
Okay, so roadblocks, as much as they frustrate me, they are useful, because a roadblock is telling you something about the manuscript that you can't see because you're in it. You're too close to it. And often it has, it might be an issue in plot. It might be that I have too many things going on, and and I'm not creating the balance of story that it's all going to meld together, so that you can see where A is related to B is related to C, and so forth. Maybe it's that um, I'm not letting my character experience what they need to experience. Sometimes as writers, we want to protect our characters, but you can't always do that. They have to go through what they go through. So I have to have those. So sometimes it's me talking to myself. Now, Rita, I know that you like Delphine, but she's wrong. And you have to let her be wrong. Don't give her any out. Don't give her any excuses. Or sometimes I've just begun the story in the wrong place, or what I put in doesn't belong there, or the plot line isn't working, and I have to be honest about that. Back to the gym, more boxing gloves.
What are you currently working on? What stories, books? Yeah, tell us.
Okay, so the thing that I'm working on right now is, well, actually, I've just finished. I should say, I've just finished doing something. About 10 years ago, directly after One Crazy Summer, I wrote a gaming novel called The Place of All Games. Man, I love this thing. It had games in it that I made. It had its own kind of language. It had its own lore, all that good stuff. But the problem was, it was pretty hard to read. Now, I loved it. I thought it was great. Um, but it needed a whole lot of revising. And so it took me 10 years this time it took me about a good 10 years to have some objectivity about it. And so I scraped off a whole lot of the gobbledygook in the language and made it as straightforward as I could make it, without me losing what I liked about it. So it is called The Place of All Games, and so that should be coming maybe in a year or two or so. Um, but what I've worked on most recently, and I am now still in the process of revising, is a young adult and adult crossover novel. It's called A Sitting in St. James. I've always said especially to the girls who wrote Blue Tights, and said, thank you for writing a story about today. We don't want to hear about slavery. I've always promised them I am not going to write about slavery. I'm going to write about what's going on right now. So I've broken my promise. I am in this book, and is Sitting in St. James. I do go back to 1860s. Well, I even go back before that. But this is a story that is based on the timeline of a white slave-owning matriarch's life and her family. But then um, you do see her personal servant and slave, Thisbe, and Lily, the cook, and a few other people. But it is basic. But this is a story about slavery, and to me, it's kind of why it had to end, why it had to fail. It was on the course of failure, war or not. It was on the course of failure. So that was something that took a lot of research and a lot of time to just really get into the culture, because it is a different culture than mine. It's Louisiana culture, French Louisiana Creole culture. And so it was the most challenging, and it's about, well, my manuscript is about 500 pages, but I'm sure it'll be less when it goes into print. But it was a challenge to do it from more of the perspective of the white slave owning family than of my familiar, as I am a descendant of slaves on both sides of my family. So yeah, so pray for me, y'all.
Well, we have a question here about ideas you might have for future books. And maybe I could broaden that a little bit to ask, where do your ideas come from?
Ooh,
How do you find new ones or new
very good.
subjects to write about?
Um, you know, I think, like many other authors, um, I get an idea every day. Like, there's stories everywhere. And so for me, it is always the one where the character speaks to me. As I'm thinking about, is this a story? It's the one where the character tends to speak to me first. I connect deeply with the characters, and so um, when when I can see the character as their own self, and not just a piece that I'm moving along the board, then I start to write. I get very excited and I start to write. But a lot of my um, in the case of One Crazy Summer, the idea really just came from. Oh, wait a minute. Let me just go back. Go back. Go back. Go back. Go back. Nope. I can't tell backwards from forward. This is where the idea came from. Pictures from children in the movement, and seeing how young they were, and that they weren't just having the breakfast; they were involved. They were on the front lines as well, and so. That told me, because I grew up in this era. I always wanted to write about the Black Panthers. I thought they were very important in the latter movement of African Americans, and so I thought, I'm not going to do this for teens. I'm going to do this for younger people, for someone the ages of these children who are carrying the signs in this Bill Irwin photograph. Um, and so I do things like I get all kinds of like I guess mementos or pieces just to kind of make me feel the story. So I had buttons, I had poetry. I had a lot of books that I got, and they had like really fabulous pictures. And even if I wouldn't use those pictures, the pictures feed me. They give me inspiration. So I think photographs are a great way to draw inspiration. This is the Black Panther intercommunal news service, and it's all of the Black Panther newspapers. And so I got an awful lot from those. I used to actually get those newspapers in St. Albans, where I grew up in New York, because Black Panthers were there, you know. And then, of course, there's art. Okay, you could not escape my neighborhood in St. Albans, and I'm sure this is true in a lot of neighborhoods, without saying Black Panther Party art. So this is by Emory Douglas. And so I saw these as big posters in my neighborhood. And so all of those things really helped to feed me and to make me let me imagine the world as if I were there. And I was lucky that I was around during a time that I got to see a good deal of it. We had hard times after my father came home from Vietnam, and I remember we went to we had a breakfast or two courtesy of the Black Panthers in St. Albans. So experience and helps a story, but I always try to do what I did as a child, make it bigger, make it just go further than my own, what I know and what I see. I always try to close my eyes and imagine, what if, I think that's my favorite word, kind of phrase. What if, then what? What if, then what? Then what happens after that,
Are there other photographs, pictures, slides you have on this PowerPoint that you would like to share with us? I think we are running toward the end of our time. So if there are some things you'd really like to show us, we would love to see them.
Oh, well, I think it's not anything that you have not seen. Let's see now. Okay, you've seen Fern and you've seen One Crazy Summer. And of course, there's PSB 11, which I had to write because I, in the middle of One Crazy Summer, I said to myself, what happens next? They come back to Brooklyn. So that's where PSB 11 comes from. And then, it just hurt my soul that, I can't say what happens because, spoiler alert. So then I had to write Gone Crazy in Alabama. But once you read PSB 11, you'll know why I had to write Gone Crazy in Alabama. I think this is the reward for having written a book, is having readers and the smiles on their faces, knowing that they like the story, and seeing that it's 10 years later, it is still around. Yay! Okay, so this is kind of how I celebrate. People ask, what did you do when you learned that you won these awards? That's what I do. I go out and I eat waffles. So there you go.
I don't know that I could think of a better reward. So you have a couple new books coming out. We're looking forward to seeing you in Youngstown in a year. Anything else you want to tell us before we make people wait?
Oh, there very well may be a graphic novel version of One Crazy Summer coming. Um, I'm hoping. So I want to encourage all of you artists out there. You are storytellers also. So yeah, keep drawing those character sketches. You never know, you might become a graphic novelist.
Any final advice to students who might want to consider doing some more writing or being a writer?
Okay. To me, okay, forget what you saw about me writing 500 words every night and miserly counting every word. I would say record. You can use your phone as a recorder and just talk into your phone. Um, Write a little bit every other day, and it doesn't have to be about anything. You're just getting warmed up and you're getting to learn your voice, and enjoying the freedom of writing. And don't feel you have to share anything, but do read a whole lot of stuff, not just novels, but read across the world. Read to feed your many interests, and I would say also look at film. Film from around the world, film of places. Just feed your senses with experiences, so that when you close your eyes, you can imagine, even if you've never been there, which has been helpful for me because I am a fearful flyer. But all the best to you. Just enjoy the power of the word.
Thank you so much, Rita, for spending an afternoon with us. We appreciate it, and we look very forward to your visit next year, to our 43rd English Festival. So thank you.
Yay! I hope to be there. I thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So long.